Good morning, viewers. I've got another farmer with me today, Lindsay Gibson from Prospect Hill in South Australia, Adelaide Hills. And Lindsay, how long have you been farming?
Pete, good morning to you.
Thanks very much.
And viewers, I've been farming at Prospect Hill since 1966. And we've been dairying, and then we've been in beef cattle production and also sheep over those 60 odd years now.
No, well, you've done a few things on your property. Lindsay, we're talking about, we've talked about it with the Honourable Robert Roganshire from Family First, and our Mayor Keith Parks, Alexandrina Council and other farmers as well. And we just want your view on what this right to take water levy, whether we use it or not, is going to do to your enterprise.
Well, Pete, this so-called right to take water is going to devastate not only my operation there at Prospect Hill, but all the farmers in the hills, and not only the Western Mount Lofty Ranges group, but the Eastern Mount Lofty, and even down to the southeast, and anywhere that any farmer into the Riverland, any of the farmers that take water to produce food for Australia are going to be impacted by this draconian legislation.
The word draconian is very, very good, Lindsay. I think you hit the nail right on the head, and we've said it a few times now, but this is not just about one area. This is about farmers virtually Australia-wide, really, because you know, we're supplying a critical need called food. We can't do without it, and we don't need this impost. And I know that where you are, you've got a reasonable sized dam. So what is that dam used for, Lindsay? Is it just used for stock, or what do you use it for?
Pete, two things there. First of all, when I spoke about the water allocations being affecting South Australia, of course it goes right across, particularly the eastern seaboard and South Australia. And so the impact of such imposts that are going to come unless we fight this thing are going to compound themselves, and all farmers will be severely affected by it. Now, in relation to the impact on my place and the water, in 1966, Pete, I saw the need for the requirement for dams to be built.
Yes.
And I built a sizable dam on my place. In the old language, it's 20 million gallons.
Right.
In megs, I'll have to go back to my calculator. I can't quite tell you that. But I built that to drought-proof my farm and ensure that having that water there will ensure that I'll have the capacity right through any dry summer to continue to make the production, get the production off the farm with the surety that we wouldn't have to sell up cattle because it was a prolonged summer, etc. So what I'm really saying to you, Pete, is we built a large dam there, and that's been the basis of my production at Prospect Hill. Now, with this impost that we've got now, what's happening is we're severely curtailed by this draconian legislation, and this government has said to us, you can only take less than 50% of the water that comes into your dam from your own land. And when you get something out of left field, such as legislation like that impeding our ability to farm, then it does two things. Firstly, it curtails my income, and secondly, the production is reduced to a point where I can't produce as much as I used to. Now, one farmer, which I am, compound that by every farmer in South Australia, the food production is going to be reduced dramatically.
And not only that, Lindsay, but what about, you know, our mental status? I mean, you know, it's pretty hard when you think that, let's just say if you had a fish shop and the government come in and said, sorry, you're not allowed to sell garfish fillets, whiting fillets, or you're not allowed to sell chips. You can only sell fritters or something like that. How can you survive? They're changing the goalposts through the Natural Resource Management Board. Now, viewers really need to know that our biggest problem is this environmental movement. And us farmers care for the environment. We're the best conservationists and environmentalists the country has, because we don't want to ruin the environment, because if we do, it impedes on our ability to grow food. So we're not that stupid. But people have got to realise that this environmental movement is destroying us. It's not about the environment. It's environmentalism, and that's what we've got to be careful of.
Well, Pete, you couldn't have put it better than that. Two things. First of all, we farmers are only custodians of this land.
Correct.
The same as the Aborigines claim that they are custodians and they have something that they need to pass on to their children. We are no different to that. We look after our land, we farm it properly, we conserve it, and we don't rape the country. Now, what this environmentalist government is doing is bringing in ideologies that are preventing us from just doing our farming. For example, they say to us with our low flow bypasses that they wish us to put in, oh no, you've got to put them in because of the preservation of the ecology downstream from your place. Now, that isn't science, it's not science-based.
Correct.
There's been no science done on that sort of concept. What I'm saying about it, Pete, is that it is purely ideological guff that has come into it, and it's from those, generally, and may I say, from the Greens.
Correct, yeah. Yep.
That come in and say, well, we haven't got what you've got, but we're going to coerce you and interfere with your way of life.
And that's what they're doing, Lindsay. They're interfering with our way of life. And look, I'd just like to say to our viewers, just before we close, that if we can't feed ourselves, that puts us in a very, very vulnerable situation. If we're going to be net food importers, and that means relying on other countries to supply us with food, that puts us in a very dangerous situation. So we need this environmental movement, this environmental bureaucracy, the Natural Resource Management Board, to back off. This mob don't produce a flaming thing. They are costing this state, and it's absolutely disgraceful. So Lindsay, I just want to thank you. I know you write a lot of letters to the papers in regards to all this. If you'd like to just finish off and say something,
I'd love to
in
say
finalisation to our viewers.
Pete, what I'd like to say is that the awareness of this whole disaster is brought about by the efforts of Flag Australia, making everybody aware of it, and I think that they're doing a wonderful job in telling our city cousins what a problem we have here with this tax that's being imposed upon us and costing us a lot of money. And secondly, I read in the one of the local papers recently that the head of this NRM in South Australia, a chap called Daniels, I think, has said, well, we need to raise the money through these taxes on our water so that we can continue to look after the environment. Well, hello, I think the farmers are far better environmentalists than academics sitting in a chair in Adelaide. And so we've got to get rid of that. We've got to bring back sanity into the whole thing and allow farmers to farm.
Couldn't agree more, Lindsay, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you haven't been well. So our viewers know, Lindsay's had cancer and he's come through this, and he doesn't need this worry on his shoulders like a lot of other farmers. And I get phone calls from farmers in their 70s and 80s that are crying to say that, you know, we need help, we're going to lose our properties, we don't need this. Australia was built on agriculture. Australia used to ride on the sheep's back, and now we have this environmental movement riding on ours, and it has to stop. So Lindsay, thanks very much, mate, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, mate, Pete, very much appreciated giving me the time to say something.